Hello and welcome to Special People, Extraordinary Times. Today we're here with Arnie Freeman, who his extraordinary time was in the Army during the Korean War. And he had a really interesting job. Good morning, Arnie. How you doing?
Good morning, Elaine.
You had a really interesting job. For me, it was interesting. What'd you do in the Army,
Well,
sir?
it was a little different. I was a newscaster and disc jockey for Armed Forces Radio in the Far East, specifically stationed in Korea. And just let me say that when I was there, the war was officially ended and an armistice had been signed.
But
That meant that there was no official fighting. But occasionally there was an incident, let's put it that way.
yeah, you heard.
Well, I could
Guns
relate a
going
little
off.
story if you'd like.
Go ahead.
We would do interviews, and of course we didn't have television, it was strictly radio, and I would go with my recorder on my back and a chopper. They'd take me up in a helicopter and take me to various places, or other people on the station to various places to do interviews. And one of the stops I made was at the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. While there, I was interviewing a couple of the guys on the ground, and all of a sudden I heard, boing! That was a shell going overhead. I packed up everything, we said back in the chopper, and goodbye.
That's not what you were there for, Arnie.
Well, no, but fortunately, my MSO at that time, or MOS, I forgot what the letters meant, Military Occupational Specialty, was disc jockey newscaster, as opposed to field artillery and fighting guy.
Right. So when Robin Williams made a movie called Good Morning Viet Nam, you did the original. You were Good Morning Korea.
It originated prior to my getting there. Back in 1955, The Adventures of Steve Canyon were a comic strip that appeared in Stars and Stripes as well as all the regular newspapers. And every morning at 7 a.m., the entire crew at our radio station in Seoul would get up. We'd all go into the studio and we'd read The Adventures of Steve Canyon. And that was something we did every morning, and most of South Korea was able to pick up our radio station in Seoul because it had a fairly large range of wattage, I guess, is what they used in those days.
Yeah.
God, it was-
AM, FM.
Oh, AM. There was no such thing. We were lucky to have that.
Well, you have a very nice radio voice. So.
Well, I worked at it because the alternative to being with Armed Forces Radio was the field artillery. And while I was on the ship heading from Seattle, Washington to Japan for deployment, they asked if anybody had radio experience. I had radio experience at our college radio station. I was instrumental in getting it started back in 1948 or 49 and 50. Anyhow, I volunteered. They accepted my audio tape. And I got lucky.
And what year did you go into the Army?
1954.
And how long were you in?
Total of 2 years. I was 2 years and 1 day, to be exact. I was drafted. And I spent my first period at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Then I was deployed to Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, where I had another interesting job. I was an instructor in CBR, chemical, biological, and radiological warfare.
You're kidding. Where did you become an instructor in such a
They
tough
decided,
field?
because I had a little bit of a college education, that perhaps I might be able to, if nothing else, articulate the
So you read a
basics.
chapter and the next day you
I'd stand
you
up
taught it.
like General Patton did in the movie Patton in front of 500 guys and talk about something they knew very little about. There were days where we had to run some of the troops through the gas chambers to familiarize them with what chlorine gas or tear gas would feel like.
Oh boy.
That was not fun.
Did you go in with them?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And then when they took their masks off, which we had to have them do at the end just for a split second, I would get them out of there as quickly as possible. With the purpose was to educate them so they'd be aware of what those gases would be like,
Sure.
so that they would know what to do in an emergency.
But that wasn't the fun part. The fun part was your radio career.
Yes, it was. We did have a lot of fun with that. We were able to do some good things in terms of some of the programming. We all had
You had what, three different studios in 3 parts of Korea?
I was in 3 parts of Korea. I was in Seoul, which was the capital, with 1 station. Then they needed help at another station, so they transferred some of us to radio station Kilroy. I think that was the one in Busan. And then we had another one called Gypsy, and I think that was in Daegu. I don't remember. It was 55 years ago, but I was at all 3. And during that period, we had the opportunity to do different types of shows. As an example, one of them in the afternoon I did was Hayloft Jamboree, where we played country western music. It was interesting. Another show we did that you might find interesting was called Mail from Home. We did that at, I think, 9 o'clock at night, where people here in the States would send letters to our station asking us to send their best to their loved one overseas and to play a certain song for them. And
nice.
Our theme song, if I remember correctly, was That's All. Etta James, I believe, did the original recording of it back in the early 50s. And that was the theme for Mail from Home.
Nice. Did you ever get to use the skills that you learned there once you were out of the Army?
I thought I would when we got home back in '56, and I applied to a couple of the New York and New Jersey radio stations. But at the time, the opportunities for what I could do really were not that prevalent. I also had an opportunity to get involved in the textile field, and since I was a young guy and I wanted to make a few dollars, I decided to follow the money.
You probably did the right thing. Arnie, I'm glad you had a good time in the Army. Somebody should have.
Yes, I was lucky. Thank you, and thank you for asking me to join you today.
My pleasure. For OCTV, I'm Elaine Kuhlman, and thank you for joining us for this edition of Special People, Extraordinary Times with Arnie Freeman.